When the blindfold was ripped from my face and I saw whose eyes were staring back at me, I understood that God has a cruel sense of humor. Because the man who had thrown me into the back of that van, the man who had drugged me and chained me to this cold radiator in this abandoned mansion, the man who believed he was destroying his brother's empire by taking me, he had no idea that he had just kidnapped his own sister-in-law. And when he found out, when he discovered that the random black girl he snatched off that street corner was secretly married to the brother he was trying to destroy, it would either be his redemption or his complete unraveling. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the moment my perfectly hidden life exploded into chaos, and show you exactly how love, secrets, and blood turned this nightmare into the most unexpected journey of my existence. Before I continue, I need to know, where in this beautiful world are you watching this from right now? Drop your location in the comments because I want to know exactly who is taking this journey with me today. And if you have not already, hit that subscribe button right now, because trust me, you do not want to miss a single second of what happens next. This story will test everything you believe about loyalty, family, and the lengths people will go to for love. My name is Amara Okafor, and 6 months before my kidnapping, I was a 27-year-old cardiac surgeon completing my residency at St. Raphael's Hospital in the heart of the city. I came from nothing, and I mean nothing. My mother cleaned houses until their hands were raw, raising me alone in a 2-bedroom apartment where the heat never worked in winter and the roaches owned the kitchen. She died when I was 19, leaving me with her wedding ring, $12,000 in medical debt, and a dream she made me promise to chase. Medicine, saving lives, building something real from the ruins she left behind. I worked 3 jobs through undergrad. I slept in my car for 2 months during my first year of medical school because I could not afford rent and tuition at the same time. I survived on ramen noodles and sheer desperation, clawing my way into a world that constantly told me I did not belong. By the time I earned my white coat, I had transformed myself into someone unrecognizable from the girl who used to cry herself to sleep, wondering how she would eat tomorrow. But beneath my polished exterior, beneath the confident surgeon who barked orders in the operating room and held beating hearts in her steady hands, I carried a secret so explosive that it could detonate my entire existence. I was married to Declan Harrington. The Harringtons were not just wealthy, they were dynasty-level powerful. The kind of family whose name appeared on hospital wings and university libraries and the sides of skyscrapers. Declan's father, Victor Harrington, had built a pharmaceutical empire worth billions, and his sons were raised as princes in a kingdom of money and influence. Declan, the eldest, was being groomed to take over everything. His younger brother, Brennan, was the wild card, the rebellious second son who had been shipped off to boarding schools and military academies his whole life because he could never quite measure up to his perfect brother. Declan and I met in the most mundane way possible, a coffee shop mix-up. He took my drink, I took his, and when we both reached for the same cup at the counter, our fingers touched and something electric passed between us. He was tall, with deep brown eyes and a gentleness that seemed impossible for someone of his status. When he smiled at me, it was not the practiced smile of a billionaire's son. It was real, genuine, the kind of smile that made me forget every wall I had built around my heart. We dated in secret from the very beginning, and not because he was ashamed of me, though I wondered about that in the early days, hated myself for wondering, but because his world was a viper's pit. His father had expectations. There were arranged marriages being negotiated, business alliances dependent on who Declan would wed. If Victor Harrington knew his heir was seeing a black woman from the wrong side of the city, a woman with nothing to her name but student loans and determination, he would have destroyed everything I had worked for. I had seen what happened to people who got in that family's way. Careers ended, reputations shattered, lives ruined with a single phone call. So we hid. For 2 years we existed in shadows, stolen weekends in hotels where no one would recognize his face, late-night phone calls where he whispered that he loved me, in a voice so sincere it broke me apart and rebuilt me every single time. And then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, in a courthouse 3 states away, with only a stranger as our witness, Declan slipped a simple gold band onto my finger and made me his wife. "I'm going to tell them," he said afterward, holding my hands as rain streaked the windows behind us. "I'm going to tell my family everything. You deserve to stand next to me in the light, Amara. You deserve everything." But before he could make that announcement, before we could step out of our hidden life and into the real one we dreamed about, everything fell apart. It started with a phone call at 3 a.m. Declan left our secret apartment in a rush, his face pale, his words clipped. His father had suffered a heart attack. Victor Harrington was dying, and the vultures were already circling the empire. For 2 weeks, Declan disappeared into the chaos of succession planning and family politics, and I understood. I waited. I trusted. Then came the morning when I was walking to my car after a brutal night shift, my scrubs still stained with someone else's blood, my mind foggy from exhaustion. A black van pulled up beside me. The door slid open. I saw men in masks, felt a needle pierce my neck. And then there was nothing but darkness. I woke in stages, consciousness returning like waves lapping at a shore. First came awareness of cold, bone-deep cold seeping up from a concrete floor through my thin clothes. Then came the pain in my shoulders, my arms stretched above my head, wrists bound by chains that clinked whenever I moved. Finally came the fear, thick and metallic on my tongue, as I remembered the van, the needle, the nothingness. My eyes adjusted slowly to the dim light filtering through boarded-up windows. I was in what had once been a grand room, high ceilings with crumbling moldings, wallpaper peeling in long strips like dead skin, a fireplace blackened with decades of soot. An abandoned mansion, the kind of place people went to disappear. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, getting closer. The door swung open, and a man entered carrying a single chair. He positioned it directly in front of me, sat down slowly, and finally looked at my face. In that moment, even through my terror, I recognized him immediately, because I had seen that face before. In photographs on Declan's dresser, in old family portraits hung in the secret apartment we shared, in the stories Declan told late at night about the brother he had lost to jealousy and rage years ago. Brennan Harrington looked almost exactly like his brother, but different in all the ways that mattered. Where Declan's features held warmth, Brennan's were sharp, angular, carved by bitterness into something harder. Where Declan's eyes invited trust, Brennan's analyzed and calculated, missing nothing. He was handsome in a dangerous way, the kind of handsome that warned you to run, while simultaneously making your feet stay planted. He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled, and there was no warmth in it at all. "Do you know why you are here?" His voice was deep, smooth, controlled. I swallowed hard, trying to find my own voice. "No." "Interesting." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Let me enlighten you. My brother, my dear, perfect, beloved brother, has something I want. Several things, actually. An inheritance that should have been split evenly, but wasn't. A company that our father is handing to him on a silver platter while I get scraps. A legacy I helped build and will never be credited for." His eyes narrowed. "And apparently, he has you." My blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know any—" "Please." He held up a hand, silencing me. "Don't insult us both with lies. I've had people watching my brother for months. You think I don't know about his secret little apartment? His mysterious disappearances? The woman he's been hiding from everyone?" He laughed, short and bitter. "I don't know exactly who you are to him. Girlfriend? Mistress? Some charity case he's taken under his wing? But I know you matter, and that makes you useful to me." He didn't know. The realization crashed through my terror like lightning through darkness. Brennan Harrington had kidnapped me because he knew I mattered to Declan, but he didn't know why. He didn't know about the marriage. He didn't know that by taking me, he had committed a crime against his own family, that the ring hidden on a chain around my neck, my wedding ring, tucked beneath my scrubs for safekeeping during surgeries, represented a bond that made me untouchable. Or it would, if anyone knew it existed. I made a split-second decision in that moment, one that would shape everything that followed. I would not tell him. Not yet. Not until I understood exactly what I was dealing with, exactly what leverage I might need, exactly how to survive this nightmare and return to my husband. So I stayed silent. Let him believe I was nobody important. Let him think he held all the cards, when in truth, I was holding an ace he couldn't imagine. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. Brennan stood and began to pace, and I noticed for the first time how he moved. Precise, military, every step measured. Declan had told me about the academies, the discipline their father had forced on his younger son in hopes of fixing him. It hadn't worked the way Victor intended. Instead of creating a soldier loyal to the family, he had forged a weapon that might one day turn against it. "What do I want?" Brennan repeated, almost to himself. "I want what was promised to me. I want what I earned. For 32 years, I have been the shadow to Declan's light, the disappointment to his success, the cautionary tale to his golden story. Nothing I did was ever enough. Perfect grades? Declan's were better. Athletic achievements? Declan's were more impressive. Business innovations? Credited to Declan because he was the heir, the face, the future." He stopped pacing and turned to face me, and for a moment I saw something beneath the bitterness. A wound that had never healed. A boy who had spent his whole life reaching for a love he could never quite grasp. "My father is dying," he continued, "and in his final act of cruelty, he's leaving everything to Declan. The company, the properties, the legacy, all of it. I get a trust fund that amounts to pocket change by Harrington standards, and a pat on the head for my troubles." "That's between you and your family," I said carefully. "I don't have anything to do with—" "But you do." He crouched down so we were eye level, and I could smell his cologne, something expensive and sharp. "My brother has a weakness. He always has. He feels too deeply, cares too much. It's why Father never fully trusted him with the ruthless decisions running an empire requires. And whatever you are to him, his eyes searched my face, you represent that weakness made flesh. If I have you, I have leverage. If I have leverage, I have negotiating power. And if I have negotiating power, I can finally take what should have been mine from the start. He stood and moved toward the door. You'll be here a while. I suggest you get comfortable. The more cooperative you are, the easier this will be for everyone. And if he doesn't give you what you want, I called after him, if he chooses his empire over me? Brennan paused at the threshold, and when he looked back, his expression was almost sad. Then I suppose we'll learn exactly how much you really meant to him. The door closed, the lock clicked, and I was alone with my fear and my secret and the desperate hope that somewhere in the city, Declan was already looking for me. Hours passed, maybe days. It was impossible to tell in that dim room with its boarded windows and perpetual twilight. Men brought me water and bland food, bread, cheese, fruit, always delivered by people in masks who never spoke. The chains were loosened enough to allow me to use a bucket in the corner for my basic needs, a humiliation I forced myself to endure without breaking down. I was a surgeon. I had survived medical school. I had held dying patients in my arms and told their families there was nothing more I could do. I would survive this. Between the silence and the solitude, my mind wandered to Declan. Was he searching for me? Did he even know I was gone? Our communication had been limited since his father's heart attack. Stolen texts, brief phone calls, whispered "I love yous" before the line went dead. For all I knew, he thought I was simply busy at the hospital, giving him space during his family crisis. By the time he realized something was wrong, how much time would have passed? I thought about my mother during those dark hours, thought about how she used to hold me when I was scared, her voice soft and steady as she promised that God had a plan, that suffering was temporary, that joy always followed pain if you held on long enough. I wished I had her faith. I wished I could believe, in this cold room with chains on my wrists, that there was purpose to this madness. But all I felt was alone. On what I estimated was the third day, Brennan returned. This time he brought something with him, a laptop, which he set on a small table and positioned so I could see the screen. "My brother has been busy," he said, an edge of amusement in his voice. "It seems your disappearance has caused quite a stir." He pressed play, and a news report filled the screen. My photograph, pulled from the hospital's website, appeared next to a headline. "Local surgeon missing. Police seek information." The anchor spoke about my last known whereabouts, my car found abandoned in the hospital parking lot, the lack of leads, the devastation of my colleagues. And then, a face I knew better than my own. Declan, standing at a press conference, his eyes red-rimmed, his voice breaking as he spoke. "Amara Okafor is not just a brilliant surgeon," he said into the microphone. She is someone very important to me. I am offering a $2 million reward for any information leading to her safe return. I am begging anyone who knows anything to please come forward. Please." Brennan paused the video, studying his brother's frozen face on the screen. "Interesting," he murmured. "Very interesting. $2 million for a friend?" He turned to look at me, his eyes sharp. "Who exactly are you to my brother, Amara Okafor?" Before I respond, let me ask you something, and I genuinely want to know what you think. If you discovered that someone you loved had been hiding a massive secret from you, not to deceive you, but to protect both of you, would you be able to forgive them? Would love be enough to overcome that broken trust? Let me know in the comments, because this question is going to matter more than you know as this story unfolds. I held Brennan's gaze, keeping my expression neutral despite my racing heart. I'm a surgeon, he knows. We've crossed paths. Crossed paths. His laugh was dry, humorless. My brother doesn't offer $2 million for someone he's crossed paths with. He doesn't appear on national television with tears in his eyes for a casual acquaintance. Try again. I don't know what you want me to say. Brennan studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he closed the laptop and set it aside, pulling his chair closer so there were only inches between us. Let me tell you something about myself, he said, his voice lower now, almost conversational. I spent 6 years in military intelligence before my father decided my skills could better serve the family business. I have interrogated people who were trained to resist interrogation. I have extracted information from men and women who would rather die than talk. Do you really think you, a surgeon who probably cries during sad movies, can hide something from me? I said nothing. His eyes narrowed. Fine. Keep your secrets for now. But understand this. My patience has limits. And when I reach those limits, I become someone very different from the man you see before you. He stood and moved toward the door, then paused. I've sent my demands to Declan. 50% of the inheritance, equal control of the company, and a public acknowledgement of my contributions to the family legacy. If he agrees, you go free within the hour. If he doesn't, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. After he left, I let myself cry for the first time since the van. Not sobs, I couldn't afford sobs, but silent tears that tracked down my face and fell onto my stained scrubs. I cried for my mother, who had survived so much worse than this, and would have been ashamed to see me breaking. I cried for Declan, who was probably destroying himself with worry and guilt, not knowing that his own brother was responsible for my disappearance. I cried for the life we had built in secret, the future we had planned, the children we had talked about having someday, in whispered late-night conversations. And then I stopped crying. Because tears wouldn't save me. Only strength would. I began to study my prison with new eyes, looking for weaknesses, escape routes, anything that might give me an advantage. The chains attached to the radiator were old, but solid. The radiator itself bolted to the floor with rusted screws that showed no signs of loosening. The windows were boarded from the outside. I could see the nails protruding through the wood. And even if I broke through, I had no idea how high up I was or what waited below. The door was reinforced, the lock beyond my reach. But there were other things I noticed. The men who brought my food were not professionals. Their movements were uncertain, their attention easily distracted. The walls were thin enough that I could sometimes hear muffled conversations from other parts of the mansion. And Brennan, for all his threats, had not actually hurt me. Whatever he was capable of, he was holding back. Why? The answer came to me slowly, pieced together from fragments of conversations I'd overheard and behaviors I'd observed. Brennan didn't want to hurt me. He wanted to hurt Declan. And he knew that if I came back damaged, if there was evidence of torture or abuse, it would destroy any chance of the reconciliation he actually craved beneath all his bitterness. Because that was the tragedy at the heart of this nightmare. Brennan Harrington didn't hate his brother. He loved him. He loved him desperately, the way only someone who has been overlooked their entire life can love the person who received all the attention they wanted. His actions weren't driven by hatred. They were driven by a longing so deep and so denied that it had twisted into something toxic. That realization became my weapon. On the 5th day, when Brennan came to check on me, I was ready. "Tell me about him," I said before he could speak. He frowned. "About who?" "Declan. You said you've been watching him for months. You clearly know him better than anyone gives you credit for. So tell me about him." Suspicion flickered in his eyes. "Why?" I shrugged as much as my chains would allow. "Because I'm going to be here for a while, apparently. And I'm tired of sitting in silence with my own thoughts. You want to talk? Let's talk." He stared at me for a long moment, searching for the trap. Then, to my surprise, he sat down. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Start from the beginning." What followed was not what I expected. Brennan talked, really talked, for the first time since my captivity began. He told me about growing up in Declan's shadow, always second best, always measuring himself against an impossible standard. He told me about the day their mother died in a car accident when Brennan was 8, and how Declan had held him while he sobbed, even though Declan was only 10 himself, and probably wanted to cry too. He told me about the military academies, the sense of exile, the letters he wrote home that were never answered. And he told me about the moment he realized his father would never love him the way he loved Declan. "I was 22, Brennan said, his voice distant. "Just graduated top of my class at West Point. Full honors. I came home expecting... I don't know what I was expecting. A handshake? A word of praise? Something." He laughed bitterly. "Father was on the phone when I walked in. He said, 'Brennan's fine, I suppose, but Declan closed the Henderson deal today. That's what matters.'" He didn't even look at me. I found myself feeling something I had not anticipated. Sympathy. Not for his actions. What he had done to me was unforgivable, but for the pain that had driven those actions. I had spent my whole life fighting to be seen, fighting against a world that told me I was worthless because of my skin color and my poverty. In a strange way, Brennan and I were not so different. We had both been undervalued. We had both been made to feel like we weren't enough. The difference was that I had channeled my pain into building something beautiful. He had let his fester until it poisoned everything. "Your brother talks about you," I said quietly. Brennan's expression hardened. "Does he?" "He says you were the bravest person he ever knew, that you survived things he couldn't have handled. He says losing you, losing the relationship you used to have, is one of his deepest regrets." Silence stretched between us. When Brennan spoke again, his voice was rough. "You're lying. You're trying to manipulate me." "Why would I lie? What would I gain from telling you something that makes you question what you're doing?" I held his gaze. "I'm telling you this because it's true. Because whatever you believe about Declan, whatever your father made you feel, Declan loves you. He always has." Brennan stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. His face was a mask of conflicting emotions: anger, pain, desperate hope quickly suppressed. "This doesn't change anything," he said, but his voice wavered. "I've made my demands. Either he meets them or what? You hurt me? You've had me for 5 days and you haven't laid a hand on me except to chain me up. You bring me food and water. You could have sent him a finger or an ear to prove you're serious, but you didn't. You're not a monster, Brennan, even if you're trying very hard to become one." His jaw tightened. "You don't know what I'm capable of," Maybe not, but I know what you're not capable of, and that's what matters." He left without another word, slamming the door behind him so hard the walls shook. But I had seen it, the crack in his armor, the doubt seeping in. I didn't know if it would be enough to save me, but it was something. It was a start. That night, something changed. The mansion, usually silent after dark, came alive with sounds. Footsteps rushing, voices shouting, the unmistakable chaos of plans going wrong. I strained against my chains, trying to hear, trying to understand. Then the door burst open, and one of Brennan's masked men rushed in. "We have to move her," he said to someone I couldn't see. "Now. They're coming." "Who's coming?" I demanded. "What's happening?" No one answered. Strong hands unlocked my chains, grabbed my arms, started to drag me toward the door. I fought, kicking, biting, clawing, but I was weak from days of captivity, my muscles stiff and uncooperative. They dragged me into a hallway lined with dust-covered portraits, past doors that led to other forgotten rooms, toward a back staircase that spiraled down into darkness. And then, echoing through the mansion, I heard a voice I would have recognized anywhere. "Amara!" Declan. Declan was here. Time fractured into fragments. Declan's voice reverberating through the mansion, the hands gripping my arms, pulling me toward the stairs. My own voice, raw and desperate, screaming his name in response. Gunshots. 1, 2, 3, from somewhere below. And then, impossibly, Brennan appearing at the top of the staircase, blocking our path, his face pale in the dim light. "Let her go," he ordered his men. They hesitated, looking between Brennan and the chaos erupting throughout the mansion. "I said let her go." His voice cracked like a whip, and suddenly I was released, stumbling against the wall, my legs nearly giving out beneath me. Brennan looked at me, really looked, and in his eyes I saw the battle raging inside him, the war between the wounded boy he had always been and the man he had forced himself to become. Then he made a decision. "Go to him," Brennan said quietly. "Take the main staircase. His men have secured the first floor." I stared at him, not understanding. "Why?" "Because you were right." His voice was barely a whisper now. "I'm not capable of becoming the monster my father's rejection wanted to create, and I'm tired of trying." I could have run. I should have run. Every survival instinct I had was screaming at me to flee, to find Declan, to escape this nightmare. But something held me in place, some recognition that this moment mattered, that what happened next would determine not just my fate, but Brennan's. "Come with me," I said. He looked at me as though I had spoken in a foreign language. "What?" "Come with me. Face your brother. End this, not with violence or revenge, but with the truth." "He'll kill me." "No, he won't. Because he's not the man you've convinced yourself he is, just like you're not the man you've pretended to be." I reached out and touched his arm, the first willing contact between us. "You want forgiveness? You want redemption? It won't come from destroying everything. It comes from this, from choosing to be different." More gunshots echoed from below. Shouts, breaking glass. We were running out of time. Brennan closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, something had shifted. The hardness was still there, but beneath it, a glimmer of something else. Hope, maybe, or surrender. "Lead the way," he said. We descended the main staircase together, stepping into absolute chaos. The mansion's grand foyer had become a battlefield. Overturned furniture, shattered chandeliers, men in tactical gear swarming through every entrance. And in the center of it all, Declan, his normally immaculate appearance in ruins, his eyes wild with desperate fury. The moment he saw me, everything else ceased to exist. He crossed the distance between us in 3 long strides and swept me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe, his face buried in my hair, his body shaking with sobs. "You're alive," he kept repeating. "You're alive, you're alive, you're alive." "I'm alive," I confirmed, my own tears flowing freely now. "I'm here. I'm okay." Then Declan saw Brennan standing behind me, and his entire demeanor transformed. The tenderness vanished, replaced by a rage so profound it seemed to distort the air around him. He released me and advanced on his brother, his hands curling into fists. "You." The word was poison. "You did this. You took her. You—" "Declan, wait." I grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "Listen to me, please." "He kidnapped you, Amara. He held you prisoner for—" His voice broke. "Do you have any idea what I've been going through? I thought you were dead. I thought—" I know. I cupped his face in my hands, forcing him to look at me. "But there's something you need to understand. Something I need to tell you, both of you." The chaos around us had stilled. Declan's men maintained their positions, weapons trained on Brennan, waiting for orders. Brennan stood motionless, his expression unreadable, his fate hanging in the balance. I reached beneath my scrubs and pulled out the chain around my neck, the chain that held my wedding ring, the simple gold band Declan had placed on my finger in that courthouse months ago. I unclasped it and slid the ring onto my finger, where it belonged, where the world could finally see it. "Declan and I are married," I said, the words falling into the silence like stones into still water. "We have been for 6 months. We kept it secret to protect me from your family, from your father, from all of this." I looked at Brennan, whose face had gone absolutely white. "You didn't kidnap your brother's girlfriend or mistress. You kidnapped your sister-in-law. You kidnapped a Harrington." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Brennan's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's not possible. Father would never—" "Father doesn't know," Declan said, his voice cold. "No one knew. We were going to announce it after everything settled." He looked at me, and some of the rage in his eyes softened into something more complicated. "You kept it secret, even here, even chained up and terrified. You didn't tell him. I didn't know who I could trust, and I didn't know what he would do if he found out." I turned to Brennan again. "You wanted leverage against your brother? You had it the whole time. You were holding his wife. His wife! And you didn't even know." Brennan's legs seemed to give out beneath him. He sank onto the stairs, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. When he looked up, his eyes were red, his face wet with tears. "I've destroyed everything," he whispered. "Whatever chance I had, whatever hope." He laughed, a broken, terrible sound. "I kidnapped my own family. I'm no better than father. I'm exactly the monster he wanted me to be." "No." The word came from Declan, surprising everyone. including Declan himself, judging by his expression. He stared at his brother for a long moment, then walked slowly toward him, his men tensing but holding their positions. "You want to know why Father always favored me?" Declan asked, his voice quiet now. "It wasn't because I was smarter or more talented or more worthy. It was because I learned to play his game. I learned to suppress everything real about myself and become what he wanted. You couldn't do that. You were too honest, too principled, too unwilling to compromise who you were. He hated that about you, and I envied it." Brennan looked up, disbelief etched across his features. "I've been playing a role my entire life," Declan continued. "The perfect son, the worthy heir, the man without weaknesses. And then I met Amara, and for the first time I found someone I couldn't pretend with. Someone who saw through every mask I wore and loved what she found underneath." He glanced at me, and his eyes held everything: love, gratitude, fear, hope. "I married her in secret because I was a coward, because I was afraid of what Father would do, what the world would think, what it would cost me. And that cowardice almost cost me her." He extended his hand to his brother. "What you did was wrong. It was criminal. It was unforgivable." He paused. "And I forgive you anyway. Because I'm tired of this family destroying itself. I'm tired of being Father's pawn. I'm tired of losing the only brother I have to a war neither of us started." Brennan stared at the offered hand as though it might bite him. The moment stretched, tension building until I thought something might snap. Then, slowly, Brennan reached up and clasped his brother's hand. The aftermath of that night unfolded in ways no one could have predicted. Declan refused to press charges against Brennan, a decision that caused an uproar among his legal team and security personnel, but one he held firm on. Instead, Brennan agreed to enter an intensive program for psychological treatment, addressing the years of trauma and resentment that had festered inside him. It wasn't forgiveness wrapped in a neat bow. It was messy, complicated, and uncertain, just like everything real tends to be. Victor Harrington died 3 weeks after my rescue. He never learned that his eldest son had married a black woman from nothing. Never got the chance to unleash the fury I'm certain he would have felt. In his will, true to form, he left nearly everything to Declan, with only token acknowledgments to Brennan. But the inheritance no longer mattered. Declan had already begun quietly restructuring the company's shares, ensuring his brother received an equal stake. They would build the empire together, or not at all. For me, the transition from hidden wife to public figure was overwhelming in ways I hadn't anticipated. The media frenzy that erupted when our marriage became known was relentless. Paparazzi outside my hospital, reporters ambushing me at coffee shops, think pieces dissecting what our relationship meant for race relations, class dynamics, the billionaire playbook. I was called a gold digger, a saint, a revolutionary, and a fool, sometimes in the same article. But Declan never wavered. He stood beside me at every press conference, every public appearance, every society event where hostile eyes tracked our every move. When his father's business associates whispered behind our backs, he withdrew their contracts. When a board member made a veiled racist comment at a shareholders' meeting, Declan had him removed within the hour. He was not just my husband. He was my shield, my advocate, my unflinching support. Brennan's recovery was a slow process. The first few months, he wouldn't see me at all. the shame too overwhelming. But I was patient. I wrote him letters about my own journey, my own battles with worthlessness and despair, my own long climb from nothing to something. Eventually, he wrote back. Small letters at first, tentative and fragile. Then longer ones, more honest ones. Letters that explored the depths of his pain and the tentative hope beginning to flicker in its wake. By the time he was released from treatment, something had transformed in him. The sharp edges remained, but they were tempered now, directed toward purpose rather than destruction. He proposed starting a foundation for youth mental health, specifically targeting children from families where success and love had become dangerously entangled. Declan funded it immediately, and I joined the board. We worked together, the three of us, turning Brennan's darkest chapter into something that might help others avoid the same fate. It wasn't easy. Some days, the trauma caught up with me. I would wake screaming from nightmares of that cold room, those chains, the certainty that I was going to die. Declan would hold me through those episodes, whispering reassurances until my heartbeat slowed and reality reasserted itself. On other days, guilt overwhelmed me. Survivor's guilt, they called it, though I wasn't sure what I had survived, or why I deserved to emerge intact when so many others didn't. But I healed. Day by day, choice by choice, I rebuilt the parts of myself that captivity had cracked. I returned to surgery, where the familiar rhythm of the operating room provided structure and purpose. I became an advocate for mental health resources for medical professionals, recognizing the toll that the profession took on even the strongest psyches. I planted roots in the life I had fought so hard to build, and on a sunny morning, exactly 1 year after my rescue, Declan and I renewed our vows in a ceremony that was everything our first wedding wasn't. Family surrounded us, Brennan as best man, nervous and proud in equal measure. My mother's wedding ring, restored and resized, encircled my finger beneath the band Declan had given me. 300 guests watched as we promised ourselves to each other again, but this time in the light, this time without secrets, this time for good. The reception was held in the mansion where I had been held captive, a choice that shocked everyone who knew the history, but one that felt essential to both Declan and me. The building had been completely renovated, transformed from a monument to decay into something beautiful and new. We danced in the room where I had been chained, and instead of fear, I felt triumph. I had not just survived this place, I had reclaimed it. During the father-daughter dance, which Brennan insisted on standing in for, since I had no father of my own, he leaned close and whispered something that broke me apart and put me back together in the span of a single breath. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough, "for seeing the person I could become instead of the person I was. You saved more than one life that night. You saved mine, too." I didn't trust myself to respond with words. Instead, I held him tighter, letting the embrace say what language couldn't. The song ended, the guests applauded, and for one perfect moment, the past released its grip, and the future stretched ahead, infinite and gleaming. But life doesn't end at the happily ever after. It continues, messy and unpredictable, and full of challenges that test everything you thought you knew. Declan and I would face our share. The struggle to start a family, the miscarriages that nearly shattered us, the eventual miracle of twins born 3 years after our public wedding, a boy and a girl who carried both our histories in their beautiful brown skin and curious eyes. Brennan would have his own journey, a redemption arc that included setbacks and relapses and the slow, painful work of becoming someone he could respect. The company would weather storms, scandals, market crashes that threatened to unravel everything the brothers had built together. But we had something stronger than circumstance. We had each other. We had a bond forged in the fire of trauma and tempered by choice. The choice to forgive, to trust, to believe that people could change. Every day was a new decision to remain committed to that belief. And every day, we made it. 5 years after the night that changed everything, I found myself standing in front of a mirror, adjusting the collar of my blouse before a speaking engagement that still seemed surreal. The venue was the same hospital where I'd worked as a resident, the same parking lot where a black van had pulled up and ended one chapter of my life so another could begin. I was here to deliver the keynote address at the annual medical conference. My story, my journey, my lessons learned from surviving the unsurvivable. Declan appeared behind me in the mirror, wrapping his arms around my waist. He looked nearly the same as he had the day we met. A few more gray hairs at his temples, perhaps, a few more lines around his eyes. But his smile was unchanged, and so was the warmth in his gaze when he looked at me. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," I admitted. "I'm about to tell 1,000 doctors and nurses that I was kidnapped and held hostage and nearly lost my mind, and somehow use that to inspire them to take better care of their own mental health." "Sounds about right." He kissed the top of my head. "You're going to be incredible. You always are." From the other room came the chaotic sounds of our twins, Elijah and Zora, named for legends we wanted them to live up to, being wrangled by their Uncle Brennan. His voice drifted through the door, patient and amused as he negotiated a dispute over whose turn it was to hold the iPad. I smiled, still marveling at how far we had all come. The truth was, I had never expected to be here. Never expected to turn my darkest nightmare into a platform for advocacy and change. But trauma has a strange way of shaping you, of forcing you to confront parts of yourself you might have otherwise ignored. The chains that had bound me to that radiator had also bound me to a mission to speak openly about the wounds we carry, the battles we fight in secret, the silence that kills more surely than any physical ailment. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the green room, Declan's hand in mine. The auditorium was packed, more packed than I had expected, faces turned toward the stage with anticipation. In the front row sat Brennan, his expression unreadable, his presence a reminder of how tangled love and pain could become. Beside him were my children, held in the laps of nurses who had volunteered to help during my speech, their innocent faces a beacon of everything I fought for. I stepped up to the podium. The applause was warm, but brief. Then silence, thick and expectant. "My name is Amara Harrington," I began, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "And 5 years ago, I was kidnapped by a man who didn't know he was abducting his own family." I told them everything. The van, the cold room, the chains, the terror that woke me even now on some nights, sweating and screaming into the darkness. But I also told them about the choices I made in that room. The choice to observe instead of panic, to strategize instead of surrender, to see humanity in my captor even when it endangered me to do so. I told them about love, the kind that survives secrets and separation, that endures through trauma and terror, that rebuilds itself from ashes and rises stronger than before. I told them about Declan, about our hidden marriage and our public redemption, about the family we had created against all odds. And I told them about Brennan, about the wounded boy inside the dangerous man, about the redemption that seemed impossible until it wasn't, about the choice, always the choice, to reach for something better than what pain had made us. You are doctors and nurses and healers, I concluded, my eyes sweeping across the audience. You spend your lives caring for others, and too often you neglect yourselves. You swallow your grief. You bury your exhaustion. You convince yourselves that your own struggles are less important than those of your patients. But I'm here to tell you that your wounds matter. Your pain matters. Your mental health matters. Because if you break, if you shatter under the weight you carry, you cannot save anyone else. You cannot pour from an empty cup. I paused, letting the words settle. I was held captive for 5 days in a room designed to break me. But the real prison, the one I struggled in for much longer, was the one I built myself out of silence and shame. It took a crisis to free me from that prison, and I don't want the same for you. Reach out. Speak up. Ask for help before you're forced to. You deserve to heal just as much as the patients you treat. The applause that followed was different from the polite greeting. It was thunderous, sustained, accompanied by people rising to their feet. I saw tears on faces throughout the crowd, saw colleagues embracing, saw the beginning of conversations that might save lives I would never know about. Afterward, at the reception, Brennan found me standing alone near the window, looking out at the parking lot where my first life had ended and my second had begun. "That was quite a speech," he said, handing me a glass of sparkling water. "It was quite a story," I replied. He nodded slowly, his gaze following mine to the pavement below. "I still think about it sometimes. What would have happened if you hadn't talked me down? If I'd stayed the man I was on track to become? You would have regretted it eventually. Maybe not soon, but eventually. Maybe. Or maybe I would have buried the regret so deep I never felt it." He turned to look at me, and in his eyes I saw the journey he had traveled. The pain, the shame, the slow climb toward peace. "You gave me something I didn't deserve, Amara. A chance, a choice, a reason to believe I could be different." "Everyone deserves that," I said simply. "Everyone." Declan joined us then, one twin on each hip, their small faces sticky with cake. Elijah reached for me immediately, and I took him, pressing my lips to his forehead and breathing in the sweet, simple smell of childhood. "Ready to go home?" Declan asked. I looked at him, my husband, my partner, my strongest advocate. I looked at Brennan, my former captor, now my brother, an unlikely member of the family I had never expected to gain. I looked at my children, miracles born from love that had survived the impossible. "Yeah," I said, feeling the weight of everything we had overcome and the lightness of everything we had built. "I'm ready." We walked out of the hospital together, all 5 of us, into a sunset that painted the sky in shades of gold and amber. The parking lot where I had been taken stretched before us, but it held no power over me anymore. It was just concrete and painted lines, a place where something terrible had started, and something beautiful had grown from its ashes. I remembered the question that had haunted me during those 5 days in chains. Would Declan choose me over his empire? Would love be enough? The answer, I now knew, was both simpler and more complex than I had imagined. Love was not enough, not on its own. Love required action. Love required sacrifice. Love required the daily, ongoing choice to show up for another person even when it was hard, even when it was painful, even when easier paths beckoned. Declan had made that choice. So had Brennan, in his own way. And so had I. We had all chosen each other, imperfect and broken and learning as we went. And in that choosing, we had found something stronger than blood, deeper than history, more enduring than any fortune. We had found family. The car door closed, the engine started, and as we pulled out of the parking lot where my nightmare had begun, I reached over and took my husband's hand, holding it tight as we drove toward home, toward tomorrow, toward all the beautiful, messy, unpredictable life still waiting to be lived. Sometimes, I thought, the greatest stories are not the ones we plan. They're the ones that kidnap us from our ordinary existence and force us to become who we were always meant to be. And if we're lucky, if we're brave, we find our way through the darkness and into a light we never knew was possible. That was my story. The black girl who was kidnapped. The secret wife who was discovered. The woman who emerged from chains stronger than she had ever been before. And it ended, as all the best stories do, with love.